beautiful day today. Look at that. The sky is really cooperating. So I think we're going to have a super eclipse here. We have a few people to talk about eclipses. First is Dr. McKenna Melville from University of Colorado.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
And you're going to tell us how to watch the eclipse?
No.
No? What are you going to tell us?
Talking about how eclipses have affected Chaco Canyon.
Oh, excellent. Oh, I thought that was later on. I'm glad you're talking now. Great.
Chaco Canyon had a major solar eclipse in 1097 that is recorded as a petroglyph in near the visitor center in Chaco Canyon, and it appears to be the first human recording of a coronal mass ejection. You maybe have heard of that. There are flares on the sun which produce huge explosions, and some of these explosions propel hot gas into the solar system. And if that cloud of hot gas hits the Earth, we could have some interesting things happen. We'll have big aurora, but sometimes there'll be major disruptions of radio communications and satellites. So it's something worth paying attention to. So the very first recording of a coronal mass ejection apparently is on the wall of a rock, which we call the Rock of the Sun in Chaco Canyon, and that is sort of what the inspiration for this talk is all about. If you've been to Chaco, you know this spire, which is called Fajada Butte, which is probably the most significant feature of Chaco. It is maybe a ladder to the heavens. Fajada Butte also contains a sun dagger, which maybe you've heard of, a dagger of light that passes through a spiral on the side of Fajada Butte. Let's go on to the next slide. So the other thing that is very significant and important and deeply important to the Chacoans, and it is to Native Americans today, is the sun. And here we have a December solstice sunrise occurring right over the top of Fajada Butte, photographed by my friend over there, John Ninneman, who you'll hear more about his photography in a little while. This was observed from a great kiva that hasn't yet been excavated, a huge structure, 60 feet in diameter. So back in about 1000, the residents of Chaco built this huge kiva, and if you stand in the center of the remains of that, on a morning when it's 20 degrees below zero on December 20th, you can get this kind of photograph, which John took using welder's glass. It looks like the moon, but it really is the sun coming up over the top of Fajada Butte. So here you have a combination of perhaps the two most important things for the Chacoans, Fajada Butte and the sun. Next slide. So as you know, there's three kinds of ways to experience eclipses. On the left is the total eclipse, where you can see the sun's corona. The corona has been one of the great mysteries of astronomy for many years, and still is, I'm pleased to say. It is 2 million degrees hot, much, much hotter than the sun itself, and it should be the other way around. As you go up above the surface of something, it should get colder, but it gets hotter, and there's an enormous amount of energy from various explosions on the sun's surface that produce this very hot corona. At the time of a total eclipse, you can take your dark glasses off because the only thing you can see is the light of the corona, which is no brighter than the moon. And for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, if you're very lucky, one has this extraordinary experience of a totally new form of the sun. I mean, for the Chacoans, for the ancient Pueblos, the sun was a deity in the sky. And of course, they saw the sun move, they saw the sun warm themselves up in the spring, and as the sun got low in the horizon in the winter, it got cold. Sun was very important, but it was always this round thing that was very, very bright. And to discover there was another side to this sun, what must have been a very, very remarkable discovery for anyone who has seen a total eclipse. Then, of course, in the middle is the annular eclipse. It sort of sounds like it occurs every year, but it's an annulus, a ring of fire going around the sun when it's partly covered over by the moon. I guess you probably realize that the moon follows a elliptical orbit around the Earth, sometimes close, sometimes further away. And when the moon is too far away, it is small and doesn't completely cover over the sun. So that is the reason we have this annular eclipse. And then the worst one is the partial eclipse. And I think that is what has given eclipses a bad name. When you don't get to see the beauty of the corona, or you don't see the glory of a ring of fire, you just see the poor sun getting attacked by the moon. And for many cultures, the sun is of course important, and to see the sun getting eaten, gobbled up by the moon is very unfortunate. So I think there's two groups of people who have seen eclipses. One, those that never see the total eclipse, like what we're going to see today, whether it's annular or total. And then there's large numbers of people who are off on the edge and only see this rather unfortunate experience of the sun getting nibbled away by the moon. And I think that's the main reason that eclipses have a bad name. They're really glorious. Anyhow, the next slide, please. So I'm sure you've seen pictures of this sort, where the moon is gradually covering over of the sun with this ring of fire around it. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that ring of fire is bright and really impressive, but it's too bright to see the solar corona. So the corona is something you're going to have to wait to see until April of next year. You probably know we're going to have a total eclipse on April 6th next year, where it passes mostly through Texas. I don't know if any of you are from Texas, but they didn't deserve anything like this. So go down to Texas in April and you'll see the solar corona. Next slide. So one of the things to look forward to on this eclipse with your glasses, and one of the unfortunate features of the annular eclipse is that the sun is always too bright, even during totality. The bright rim of light around the moon is still dangerous. And so don't take your glasses off anytime today, for example. Whereas you can during a total eclipse where there's only the corona, but for an annular eclipse, you've got to watch out. And one always, as an astronomer, you always fear that there's hundreds of people out there. Many of them have glasses, some don't, and they want to look up and see what folks are seeing, and that's really bad. That's really bad karma. But with glasses, just as a portion of the sun is getting covered over by the moon, you can see sometimes bright beads of light, which are known as Bailey's beads, discovered by a British observer back in 1848, named Mr. Bailey, and he is always resurrected as Bailey's beads. And the fascinating thing about it is that the moon is not a billiard ball. As you know, it has mountains and valleys, and sometimes light will sneak through the valleys of the sun, valleys of the moon, I mean, and produce these bright beads. So when you see these bright beads on the right-hand side and a spectacular one on the left, you're seeing light passing through a narrow canyon or crack on the edge of the moon. Next slide. So here is the thing, the other thing that is so unique about the annular eclipse is that the sun gets squeezed down by the moon to a small source of light, and it is so small that if you stand underneath a tree, we don't have too many of those, the leaves of a tree will act like a pinhole camera, and you'll get projections of the sun on the ground, on a building, on a piece of paper, just as totality is occurring. And it's actually almost better than the total eclipse, you know, because it's interactive. The sun is projecting something on the ground that you can see, and you can actually improve upon. Next slide. Next. Another image of this is during an annular eclipse, and you can see there's a sidewalk and a lawn where it's being projected on. Next slide. Now this is my favorite, because you don't need a tree. All you need is your hands crossed over to create a small pinhole, and you can make your own image. I mean, you can't do this normally in life, to create your own image of the sun wherever you want to project it. We had an annular eclipse back in 2012 that crossed Chaco Canyon, and my wife and I and lots of other people were observing it in Pueblo Bonito, and I think we were less dressed than we are now, just T-shirts, and we realized that you don't need to use your fingers, but you can use your armpits, and pretty soon we pointed out to everybody that, you know, with your armpits you can create an image on the ground. And so we had everyone doing chicken dances for for the time. This is supposed to be a serious talk, and we're not supposed to talk about chicken dances, but I'd be very disappointed if some of you don't try that. Take your coats off so you have a good hole produced by your armpit. Next slide. So here is what we'll see. You know, this beautiful ring of fire. No palm trees here. Next slide. Rather extraordinary one of the ring of fire as the sun is setting. Really a glorious image, glorious view. Next slide is the a total eclipse where you see the corona. And this has a quality of beauty to it that you could never imagine the sun possessed until you see it yourself. Next slide is another image of the solar corona, which is really extraordinary. And what we're seeing here is a very, very hot gas that is being organized by the magnetic field of the sun. The sun has a magnetic field like the Earth, has north and south pole, and here's you can imagine, here is the north and south pole of the magnetic field of the sun, and the magnetic field lines go like that, and the corona is organized by the magnetic field of the sun. Still a source of great mystery for us astronomers. Next slide. So in Chaco, outside the visitor center, and I hope you've been there, or if you're not, make a beeline for it. There is this rock called the rock, which is the Rock of the Sun. We've named it originally Piedra del Sol, and people felt that maybe we should call it the Rock of the Sun because Spanish is maybe not a good language to use for the ancestral pueblos. But anyhow, so you'll notice behind it is the visitor center, and so we discovered this in 1993. It's really astonishing to have this rock really not discovered until 20 or 30 years ago. So here's the Rock of the Sun. Next slide is the face, another view of the face of the rock, and And on this face here is the petroglyph of the eclipse. For many years, the Park Service was very fussy about not wanting anyone to go off major highways or roads, and we published the story of this eclipse petroglyph, and really bugged the rangers when they wanted to see it up close. So fortunately, the park has built a ramp and a viewing platform that gets you within 10 feet or so of the eclipse petroglyph. Next slide is the side of the rock, the south side, which contains Kokopelli. I'm sure you know the flute player. Several images of Kokopelli, and right in the center, it looks like a tick, a bug, and that's the sun. Believe it or not, I think it is anyhow. It takes a solar astronomer to love something like that. But anyhow, it's the only petroglyph of that sort in Chaco or anywhere in the Southwest, as far as I know. And here is, it's a circle with curly cues coming out of it, and those I think are a coronal mass ejection that they must have captured first, drawing perhaps with charcoal, and then considered it important enough to make it permanent. Next slide. So here on the far left is enlarged image of petroglyph. One of the things in a total eclipse that is really remarkable is the stars come out, and the brightest object in the sky usually is what we've been looking at this morning, Venus up there. You've seen it really bright. It looked like a balloon with a flame coming out. But Venus is always close to the sun, and you can't see it normally during the daytime because the sky is too bright. But when we have an eclipse, the first thing that comes out is this bright object, Venus. And a number of cultures, like in Mesoamerica, feel like that's the smoking gun of the creature that's been responsible for eating the sun. And so, although we feel Venus is the goddess of beauty, in Mesoamerica, Venus is the demon that's very dangerous, that has just eaten the sun, and it's on its way to take care of us. And off on the upper left side of this image is Venus, we think, and then in the middle is a drawing taken back in 1860 of another total eclipse where there is a coronal mass ejection off in the upper left of gas coming out. And then here is an actual photograph taken from a satellite of a coronal mass ejection. These coronal mass ejections are really important. They're huge clouds of ionized and hot hydrogen and protons and electrons, and they can produce beautiful aurora if you're close enough to the North Pole or South Pole. Next slide. So we're having a satellite launched next year called Punch, that is a series of 4 boxes that is going to be launched to observe coronal mass ejections. They're going to completely surround the sun, and every single coronal mass ejection that occurs is going to be observed by Punch. And as part of the educational effort of NASA, they've used the petroglyph as their insignia of this satellite. And of course, back in 1994, I had no idea that anyone else was going to be interested in this funny-looking bug on the rock. But now it appears everywhere in all of the advertisements of the satellite. And there's the petroglyph, and then the lower part is the corona itself. So it's glorious that we've been legitimated by NASA spending a lot of millions of dollars. Next slide. So the issue is that I want to talk about here is there any evidence that the Chacoans back in the 11th century were transformed? Like I feel like we today are transformed by watching these glorious balloons. I mean, this is an amazing experience. Were they transformed by discovering this other beautiful feature of the sun? And there are three things that apparently happened. One, that Pueblo Bonito, which is the most massive ancient structure in North America, north of Mexico, has 640 rooms. It's immense. And Pueblo Bonito was originally not north-south, but tilted by 20 degrees from north-south. And after the eclipse occurred, they rotated this immense object, this immense building, so that it's north-south. They built a north-south wall in around 1100, soon after the eclipse. Another very strange thing that occurred then is that the Chacoans had so-called cylinder jars, maybe that are duplicates of what the Mayans used for drinking cacao, and there were some in Pueblo Bonito. There was 120 of these cylinder jars that were stored away in a room in Pueblo Bonito, and apparently they were used for rituals, if they're similar to those in Mexico, where people would have two of these jars. They're really beautiful, and they would froth the cacao. They pour cacao from one jar to the other, and one interpretation is that was a rain-making ceremony. You know, you have sacred liquid getting poured from one jar to the next, and I don't know if that really was taking place because we have no records of that, but there may be the very important ritual occurring at that time. Then, very, very strange, in 1099, 1100, they apparently felt that these jars were themselves, they became too powerful and dangerous for some reason, we don't know. And so they organized a ritual destruction of these jars. They went into this room which had the jars stored on shelves and poured grease around the floor and lit it. And the intent was to remove these objects that had become too powerful. It's almost like artificial intelligence, you know. Something you create that you discover has become too valuable, too important, that you've sort of lost total control over it. So, and the third one is that beginning 1100, every new house that was built in Chaco Canyon has a view of the sun at winter solstice rising behind a point on the horizon. Before that, it didn't. That did not apply to most of the great houses. But after that, the buildings that were constructed all had winter solstice as an important feature of their skyscape. Next slide. So here is Pueblo Bonito, and you can see a line in the center, which is the north-south line, which was created after the eclipse, and apparently sort of represented the great house becoming a cosmos. It reflected the universe as it is north-south. This wall was built over a pre-existing kiva, so they obviously transformed what was the structure earlier to something that was cosmic. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, so here is the original shape of Pueblo Bonito in the 900. And as you can see, the major axis is tilted away from the vertical, which would be north-south. Next slide is what happened after the eclipse. On the right-hand side is the original shape, and north-south is the new line that was established at 1100. So this indicates the eclipse was not just a normal, everyday event. They took this major building of theirs and redesigned it to be a copy of the cosmos, being aligned to north-south. And indeed, in this great kiva in the center, if you put up a camera at night for a time exposure, you can see the stars going around the North Pole for several hours, and that's exactly in line with that kiva. I mean, it demonstrates clearly this was something that they saw and felt was important. Next slide. So here are these marvelous cylinder jars. They're just works of art, and they've been cleaned up. But anyhow, that's on the right-hand side is the pile of these that was found in the rubble remains of this room that was destroyed. Why they didn't smash each one by itself is not clear. But clearly, this was their attempt to reduce the power of these artificial AI of their jars. Next one. Next slide is what we see now in Chaco in terms of the sun rising by a feature of the horizon. There is on the left-hand side there is the sun rising on a corner of the canyon. Anyhow, there are about 12 other great houses that have the sun rising on a special part of the horizon. And again, this may have been the consequence of the eclipse. So I hope many of you are transformed by the annual eclipse, but especially by the balloon festival. So thank you.
There's some controversy, but there's a legend that Thales of Miletus was an ancient Greek philosopher, and that he predicted that an eclipse would occur while there was a war going on. And there was two nations that were fighting against each other, the Lydians and the Medes, and Thales predicted that in the middle of the battle, an eclipse would occur. It did, apparently, and that ended the war, right? It's a very famous historic feature, but historians are like, well, did Thales really have the capability to predict eclipses, 500 years before Christ? Well, if you look into the history, he certainly may have, right? There is the Babylonians, long before the Greeks, kept very good records of eclipses as they occurred. And as they compiled data, literally over thousands of years, they started to see a pattern. And that pattern was that these eclipses would occur every, 223 months. So back in those days, they kept track of time by the phases of the moon, right? And so after the moon had gone through a full moon to full moon, 223 times, it was time again for another eclipse, right? So now it's a little bit tricky, right? There's different, when we talk about a month, how long is a month? So first of all, I'm going to give away some gifts here if people can answer these questions. First of all, the full moon to full moon, how long does it take? How many days? 28. I heard that one right there. All right.
Be loud, be strong.
So it's actually close. It's 29 and a half, okay? 28 is close enough. There's two different months, two different ways to look at the month caused by the moon is, one is full moon to full moon, which is a 29.5, but the other is how long does it take the moon to go 360 degrees around the earth, and that's only 27 days. So 28 is about the average, okay? So if you take 223 lunar cycles, multiply that by 29.5 days, you end up with 6,585 days, which is 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Okay, so this cycle repeats itself every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Okay, so that's when we can expect to have eclipses. But why doesn't an eclipse happen every month? Doesn't the moon go around the earth every month? And so it must get in between the sun and the earth every month. Why don't we have an eclipse every month? I got a t-shirt now.
The angle and the dangle.
The angle, there you go. Give me my props. We have some props here. I need a hula hoop. I need that one. I need a little ball. Okay, so I have an earth here, and I need somebody to suspend the earth. I have my wife with me today, Mother Earth, right there, right?
I make us earth.
Right. Stick it up there, right? So here's the moon going around the earth, right? This is the orbit of the moon. Now we need the sun. Here's my daughter. She lights up our life, so she's we're gonna put the sun over here. No, over here.
I can be over here.
Right. So if the orbit of the moon was right in line with the line between, you guys got to stop moving. If the orbit of the moon was right in line with the center line of the earth and the center line of the sun, we'd get an eclipse all the time, right? But it's actually tilted 5 degrees, right? So when it's tilted 5 degrees, that shadow cast by the sun most of the time misses the earth. It either goes above it or it goes below it. So why do we get an eclipse at all? Anybody? This is a tough one. Why do we get, if the orbit's tilted 5 degrees, then how can we get an eclipse? There's no, rotate nodes, kind of, what's it?
2 intersections.
There is 2 intersections, those are the nodes. Haven't heard the word I wanted to hear, right? What? Alignment? No. Precession. She got it. Here you go.
Thank you. Oh, I moved the earth.
So this orbit precesses, just like the top, when the top's spinning. So this orbit, over the course of 18 years, precesses like this, and then every 18 years, one of these nodes, or the node is in the right place so that the sun and the moon and the earth all line up, and that's when you get the eclipse, right? So it's a combination of the precession of the moon's orbit as it moves around the sun, and then you have to get the moon in the right place. Okay, so
And now he'll juggle these.
right. So now I said it was 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So after, if you go through that cycle, that 8 hours causes the Earth to rotate 120 degrees, right? So if we had an eclipse, and we're 18 years later, we're going to have another eclipse, but not in the same spot on the Earth, because it's rotated for 8 hours, right? So if we go through 3 of those cycles, 8 hours, 16 hours, and then 24 hours, now we've lined back up, so we're in the same spot, okay? When I was young, growing up here in Albuquerque, there was an eclipse when I was a teenager. And it was a long time ago, right? Yeah. So, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was almost Chaco Canyon, right? So the other day I said, I wonder when that eclipse was, right? Well, if it's an 18-year cycle with 11 months and 8 hours, multiply that by 3, that's 54 years ago. I was 14 years old, 54 years ago. That's when we had the eclipse in Albuquerque. So these things do cycle, and we can find, we can very easily predict when they were, or when they're going to occur in the future, or when they were in the past. Okay, so these eclipses do occur, and they actually occur pretty regularly on the Earth. There's a few of them, at least a partial eclipse somewhere on the face of the Earth, almost every year. So it's not as rare as we think it is, because we don't actually experience it ourselves. So can we use eclipses for other things? Sure. One of the first very good, not very, well, pretty good measurements of the speed of light was an astronomer was looking at the eclipse of Io on Jupiter. So Io is one of the moons on Jupiter. So as it got in between the Earth and Jupiter, it would be eclipsed. He measured that. He knew the period of Io around that, and the period changed if he was measuring the cycle in the summer as opposed to in the winter. Why would it change? It was off by 3.5 minutes. This is a really tough one. Anybody figure out why the period of Io's orbit would change 3.5 minutes?
Jupiter's orbit is 500 million miles from the Earth, so when it was on the other side, it would take longer for the light to...
It has nothing to do with Jupiter. It has everything to do with Earth. No takers?
Sometimes the Earth is on the same side, closer to Jupiter, sometimes it's further away. So
Almost. Sometimes the Earth is moving towards Jupiter, and sometimes the Earth is moving away from Jupiter, right? So that juxtaposition, it took light a little bit longer to reach the Earth. That signal that was being produced by the Io-Jupiter combination took a little bit longer, and they used that to make the first estimate of the speed of light. Okay, and they got 140,000 miles per second. The actual speed of light is 187,000 miles per second, so not too bad, right, for doing it way back. All right. Okay, I got one more thing, and then we're gonna move on. I got a really good thing to give away here.
Give the sun away.
Give the sun away? No.
You're giving me away?
I'll warn you, it's very expensive. Okay, so another thing that eclipses on other planets can be used for is the eclipse of Pluto, right? So how often, okay, yeah, this one is going to, oh no, I got a better one. How often can we see an eclipse on Pluto by one of its moons? I know we won't get this. 127 years. Once every 127 years, we can watch one of the moons eclipse Pluto. And when we do that, the light from Pluto dims just a tiny bit, right? While the moon is covering it up. Like, this is light that's reflected, sunlight that's reflected off of Pluto, gets eclipsed by that moon. And from that, we can measure the diameter of Pluto. Okay, so we have this distant neighbor of ours, far, far away, and every 127 years, we can measure its diameter. Okay, the diameter of Pluto is about 1,800 miles. It's about the distance between from Albuquerque to Pittsburgh. So that's the size of Pluto. It's measured from eclipses. Okay, now the last one, and then we'll turn it over. The moon is actually receding away from the Earth because of all of the multi-body problems in the solar system. And so the moon recesses away about 3.8 centimeters a year. It's getting a little bit further. So eventually, there will be no more full eclipses, only annular eclipses after the moon has moved far enough away, right? Okay, so for the last prize, how long until there are no more full eclipses?
300 years.
300?
375.
375. 600 years.
4,000.
4,000. Keep going.
876.
No. What? Half a billion? Million. Keep going higher.
A billion years.
Not a billion years.
600 million years.
600 million years is exactly right.
600 million years.
Yeah. So in 600 million years, you'll never be able to see a full eclipse again. So because of that, make sure you go to Texas this coming April, because you don't want to, you want to make sure you see one of those. All right, we're going to move along. We have a really great speaker next. Kate Devine is going to come and talk to us. You're going to tell us how to protect ourselves, right? Okay, good. Do you have a mic or you want mine?
I'll take yours.
Okay.
Holly, do you have another one for me? Okay.
I got it.
Okay. All right, how's that sound? It is hard to follow, Van. I have no door prizes. I didn't know that we could do that. I could just give this one away. So I have 15 minutes to tell you guys some safety things that can be boiled down in the sentence behind me. Never look directly at the sun. That is really the whole thing. But since I'm talking to a bunch of scientists, I figured I'd give you a couple reasons why, because if you're anything like my 5-year-old or my 7-year-old who are back there, they're going to say, well, why not? And here's a lot of reasons why not. So next slide, please. Oh, and then my contact info is there. I've been up since 3 in the morning, like most of you, so if I misspeak and say the wrong thing, you can tell me by email later. So. All right, so this is from the American Astronomical Society. It's just kind of the slideshow of what we're going to expect, and you've seen some of this already. But the biggest thing is always use a filter today when looking at the sun. There is no safe moment during this annular eclipse where you can look at the sun without protection on your eyes. That's the big thing here. All right, so we can go to the next slide. And we can expect that the sun will be blocked. About 90% of the sun will be blocked. So that's great. It's going to look awesome. But 90% is not that dark. I don't know if you've done any home decorating, but this is from the highly authoritative source of blinds.com of what 90% light blockage drapes look like, right? And so this is 90% of the light is being blocked, and you still get a lot of sunlight in that room. So it's still going to be pretty bright out. It's enough to definitely damage your eyes if you were to look without any protection. And so how much energy does the sun emit, just to kind of get some science behind this? Well, I'm an astrophysicist, so I will tell you it's 1 solar luminosity. Very easy. But yes, but you probably a lot of engineers in here, so my engineer husband, who is the techie in our family, told me to put it in something more interesting for you, so I've got it in watts, so you can go ahead and advance to watts. And then BTU per second, so that's about 10 to the 26 watts, or about 10 to the 23rd BTU per second, which is still meaningless, which is why astronomers use solar luminosities, so you can take us to something more interesting. So engineers, I've been told by Wikipedia, like gasoline gallons per second as an energy, or as a power. And so we've got about 3 quintillion gasoline gallons per second being put out by the sun, which is equivalent to about 90 trillion kilotons of TNT, or about, let's see if I've got my numbers right, about 6 trillion Hiroshima bombs per second coming off the sun. So there's a lot of energy coming off of that sun. But then it gets spread out over a big bubble of space, right? We're about 150 million miles away from the sun. So Sandy, you can give me the next slide here. And so not all of that light reaches us. We're a tiny planet, 150 million miles away from the sun. So how much of that power from the sun is actually reaching us here on Earth? Well, according to NASA, for every square meter on average, so if you average over days and nights and winters and all the seasons, we're getting about 324 watts, or about 324 joules per second. So that's, a few light bulbs per square meter of energy coming in. But if you take that over the entire surface area of our planet, that is still about 44 million gigawatt power plants of energy coming onto the surface of our planet, just from our sun. So the take-home point there is a lot of energy is coming off that light source in the sky. Never look at it without protection. So I'm going to keep emphasizing that. And the funny thing is, everyone is being told this, but a lot of people do it anyway. So I'm just going to keep saying it. So what happens? If you're going to go out and do it anyways, what's going to happen to your eye? Well, I'm sure if you've ever seen, if you've ever played with magnifying, a lot of you are scientists, so I'm sure you did this as children. Magnifying glasses, you can focus the light down, right, with the lens, and it focuses the light. Well, your eye is a lens, right? So if you look at the sun, it's going to focus that light onto the back of onto your retina. And you can just advance the animation here and pop the next one up. Yeah, which, if you've ever, don't do this. This is me, and I don't let my kids do this. But you can, if you burned ants or started fires. And that's basically that, all of that light, the pinpoint of light from the sun is going to be focused onto the back of your retina. Fun fact, some of you are probably medical doctors. I'm not that kind of doctor, but what I've read on the internet, your retina doesn't feel pain. You don't have nerve endings back there. And so you can just, if you can get past the brightness, you could, in theory, don't do it, but you could stare at the sun, and it's not going to hurt. And that's the dangerous part, right? Your brain doesn't have that, like, ouch, this hurts, like touching a hot stove. So people do this, right? And so people look at the sun, they focus that light, and you won't know it until a little bit later. So that if you do look at the sun, please see your optometrist afterwards. They've got a lot of people do this, and then. So I went down a large Wikipedia rabbit hole and just started looking up medical journals. And it was, so if you are a medical doctor or an optometrist, about 3 months from now is a really good opportunity for you to do a case study on all the people who have looked at the sun. So this one's from the 2017 eclipse, and then we can go back another eclipse back a little bit further. This one's from a 2014 eclipse, and you can go further. And then this one's from the 1999 eclipse in the UK, and you can go further. Back to 1970. So there's, I'm telling you, don't look at the sun without protection. People do it anyways, and then they wind up in medical journals. And like, if this is how you like to spend your Saturdays, like I did, you can read all sorts of interesting ways that people have induced solar retinopathy by staring at the sun. It's never a good idea. It's very dangerous. Use those solar glasses. Make sure that your children are using them. Make sure that everyone's using them. So any safety tips? I've heard a couple of these already passed around. There are glasses. Use those. You can also just punch a hole in a piece of paper with your button and make a solar projector. So you can see behind me here, just a little pinpoint projector. You just need 2 pieces of paper and something to punch a hole in them, and you can make a really nice little projector that way to focus the sun and use a pinhole projector. They're very easy to make. You have no excuse to look at the sun without protection. And again, this is what we can expect. Just to emphasize, always filter today. And if you have really nice cameras, some people say, well, I'm looking through my camera, so that's fine, right? It's just like a double lens. You're making it worse, right? You're collecting even more light. So if you're using any sort of camera or telescope or anything that you are pointing at the sun, it should have an appropriate solar filter on it so that you don't hurt yourself. So make sure that you always have the solar filters there. If you're taking a picture with your camera, you might damage your camera, or with your phone, something that you're not looking through. It might damage that. I don't know. I'm not that kind of scientist. But at least you're not looking through it. So I'm less worried about that. But anything you're lining your eye up with today, make sure there's a solar filter on it. So this is what should we expect. So starting in a few minutes here, starting a few minutes ago. So now what we are seeing is that moon is passing in front of the sun. So the moon has already started passing in front of the sun. And you can see it kind of coming into alignment here. And what we will expect at annularity is on the side there. So we're going to see it move into place. And this is the why can't we take off our glasses moment. Why are some eclipses total and why are some annular? And this is the idea. I'm not sure if I've heard this mentioned yet in some of the talks. I was out telling my kids to calm down earlier, so I'm not sure if I missed it. But the moon orbits the Earth not in a perfect circle like this, but in a slightly elliptical orbit, which means at some points in the orbit it's closer and some points it's further away. And I don't know if you can play the little video. Did it play behind me here? You can play it one more time. And you can see that orbit, right, where it looks mostly circular, but it's just enough that when it's at apogee versus perigee, you get these different sizes. And I'm sure every time a supermoon happens, it's all over the front page, like always, and you get kind of burned out on supermoons. But this is the idea of like a supermoon versus a micromoon, right? That depending on where the moon is in its orbit around the sun, or the orbit around the Earth, it's looking a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So we're having an annular eclipse today because the moon is a little bit further away. It has a little bit smaller angular size on the sky than the sun. And we're lucky. We should consider ourselves lucky because at some point as the moon moves further away in about 600 million years, we're not even going to have those opportunities for those supermoons anymore, the moons that are big enough to block the sun. So. So this is a lot of text, just to kind of what to expect now. So I think I am the opening act to the eclipse. I think I'm the last speaker until we go out and get to see some stuff happening. So for the next hour, it's going to be pretty chill. It's too bad we had last call already. We can go out, look through your solar filters, and we'll see the moon progressively move in front of the sun. The sun's going to get more and more and more eclipsed. Some of the things to kind of watch for here is just changes in the quality of the light. It's going to be very subtle, and so your eyes are probably going to adjust as this is happening. You're not going to notice the light dimming. It's going to be subtle, so keep peeking and you'll notice kind of as you're meandering around and buying knickknacks or whatever that the moon is slowly moving in front. And then around 10:30 is where you're really going to be wanting to pay attention. So 10:30, you can move me one slide forward. Oh, and then we already saw the shadows here, but this is another, so in the next hour or so, keep watching the shadows. As we get closer to about 10:30, closer to annularity, this is when the shadows are going to start getting really fun. And like you can make whatever you want. I guess you can do it with your armpits. I didn't know that. I learned that new thing today. But you can make hold up the chili ristra and get the shadows through the chilies, like whatever it takes to make these shadow patterns, and watch for that.
Wow.
So. And then about 15 minutes before annularity is when you should set your timer to really start paying attention here. This is my first annular eclipse. It's my second total eclipse, and this is one of the reasons I came to talk is that we were doing a lot of outreach. I teach at the College of Idaho, which is in Boise, and so we did a lot of outreach in 2017 for the total solar eclipse there. So my experience of eclipses is just total. I've never had this annular eclipse before. So it'll be really interesting for me to see how the light change compares. But watch for the light, watch for animals, shadows, colors. You might notice the temperature drop perceptibly just because, again, we're going down. We're losing about 90% of the sunlight as the eclipse moves into annularity. And then right around 10:30, so first contact is what just happened, where the moon first started passing in front of the sun. Second contact is where we get the second side of the moon fully in front of the sun. And so that's where we'll start to see these Bailey's beads, which one of the earlier speakers was talking about. And it's going to be a very short moment in time, so you'll want to start looking a little bit early. And that's where we can actually see, again, proof that the moon is not this smooth sphere, that it actually has valleys and peaks. And you can see the light peeking through those valleys as these beads on the side of the moon as the second side moves in front of the sun. So that's the exciting thing to watch for there. And honestly, I think that's probably, for an annular eclipse, one of the more exciting moments is when you get those Bailey's beads. And then we'll have, I think, about 10-ish minutes of annularity. And so full annularity will start at 10:36? I wrote these all down because I knew I was going to get up early and forget them all. Keep the glasses on, keep the glasses on, keep the glasses on. And enjoy it. So make sure you're not looking at the sun without protection, and then you have a few minutes just to really take it in, try and get some pictures. And then at about 10:39, that's when you're going to want, and then as the other side of the moon moves out, you'll have a second chance to look for those Bailey's beads. And then the whole process happens in reverse, and we go home. So I hope that is all I have. Again, the main take-home point here is never look at the sun without eye protection. If you do, you might want to see an ophthalmologist, especially if you start seeing dark spots or anything weird with your vision after today, your optometrist, and get some help with your eyes. But enjoy it, have fun, be safe, and thanks so much for listening.
Okay, so yes, apparently the moon has started to eclipse. I asked them to hold it up a few minutes because we're running behind schedule, but they didn't want to do it. So we're going to take a break now for an hour or so you can go watch the eclipse, make sure you're safe. And oh yeah, and there's going to be a balloon glow when it's full annularity, so it'll when it gets a little bit dark. And then after the eclipse, we're going to come back, have another talk. And we're also streaming all of this live back down to Socorro. But there's also some experiments going on in Socorro, and we're going to get a report from them after the eclipse. So have some fun. Our next speaker is John Nimmerman. Did I say it right? Ninneman. Pretty close, right? As close as I get. So John's going to show us essentially astrophotography, right? Okay, great. Well, I'll let you take it over.
Thank you. I don't mind being like the last on the program. I sort of have a warm-up band, right? So like that. Kim kind of set the stage for some of the things I want to talk about, show you some photography. Kim and I have known each other since the early 2000s, met him at an event up at Chimney Rock, which is a lunar standstill event. And we've been friends ever since. I've followed him around, learned an awful lot. My wife is an archaeologist, retired from Mesa Verde National Park. So between them, they've taught me enough to be dangerous. So I'm not an astronomer, but my field of interest is archaeoastronomy, which is what the ancient people knew about astronomy, and most specifically in the Southwest. So my expertise really is photography. That's it. I'm not an astronomer, so that's my qualification to begin. So I'd like to start out with, why don't we start with the next slide? What I want to do is just set the limits of what I'm talking about. If we go to the next slide, please. Want to keep us on the Colorado Plateau. So the Southwest is a big area. Colorado Plateau just kind of limits where we're going to be. And you're all familiar with that. Rocky Mountains on the east and Basin and Range on the west. And we're sitting right in the middle of that. There's Albuquerque on the map. Unfortunately, Socorro isn't on this map. No, anyway, whatever. Next slide, please. And what I want to focus on is the early Puebloan people, the ancestral Puebloan people, and specifically a period of time that we call the Choclo Fluorescence, about 850 to 1150. These are kind of loose dates, but it was a period of time where a lot of captured a lot of interest. I think more work has been done archaeologically in that period of time and archaeoastronomy in that period of time than any other time in this particular region. So we've gathered a lot of information that I want to share with you photographically. Next slide, please. So, and when we interpret what we're looking at, we have two sources of information. I need to keep clicking on this, so hit it again, please. We have what's called material culture, and what we have is called ethnography. Hit it again, please. Ethnography, what we're talking about is where they built, what they built, the stuff they left behind. It's what the archaeologists that have to deal with. And hit it again. Ethnography, of course, is how much of that information was carried forward to the descendants of the people here. And understandably, they're not really willing to share an awful lot often. So we do not have a good idea of what the descendants can tell us about the people that lived here before. So what do? Hit it again. We fill in the blanks, right? So what we're doing is taking evidence and we're trying to put a story together with the evidence that's presented. How certain can we be? Next slide, please. And I put in italics, what do we know about the astronomical observational knowledge of the early people on the Colorado Plateau? Do we really know? What we're doing is looking at circumstantial evidence, and we're putting stories together with the best information that we have available. So we take it from there. Next slide, please. So we ask questions like this. Why do we think this was important to the ancestral Pueblo people? The next slide, hit it again. And what does the landscape have to do with it? And we're really convinced that the landscape has an awful lot to do with the knowledge of these people and the importance they placed on it, particularly when celestial events interacted with the landscape, and which often happens out here. Next slide, please. As far as ethnography, you have little bits of information. This picture is of a sun priest. It was called a Pequin, and he was in the Zuni Pueblo. He was the last sun priest in history. And the question always is, well, why was he the last sun priest? Well, we had calendars, right? So they just resorted to calendars. They really didn't need someone watching the calendar, watching the sky. They didn't need to do that anymore. Next, hit it again. But one of the things that was important to these people, including the sun priest, was to watch the sunrise, the position of the sun on the horizon, and again, the interaction of the sun with the landscape was very important. Now, the important thing about this, though, is you have to stand in one place to make this work. So there were sun watching stations. Some of these have been moved or been identified archaeologically. People can find them. They're marked. There's something about them that you knew someone stood there and did this. This is a diagram from the Hopi, and just shows you one of the things that a sun priest might see is the position, what was the position of the sun on the horizon throughout the year. Winter solstice, of course, the sun is going to be farther to the south and turn around and move the other direction. Summer solstice is going to be at the other extreme. And it was important agriculturally for these people. You know when to plant the corn, when to do the harvest, when to get the fields ready. And there were certainly ceremonies that happened at each of these ends. Ceremonies to turn the sun back around. So it was a very important kind of thing to know. But again, standing in one place in order to do this. If you move around, you can move the sun around too, but you got to stay in one place. Next slide, please. So this is information you all know, right? This is the orbit of the sun called the ecliptic. And the ecliptic is the counterclockwise rotation of the Earth around the sun and in a plane. And when it reaches extremes, we have the solstices. The Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees, so this is what gives us the seasons. When we're tilted away from the sun, we get the winter season. When it's tilted toward the sun, it's going to be summer solstice, and it's going to be warmer. We're going to get the season of that. So how long does this take? 365 and a fourth days. What do we do with that fourth day? It's that sleep year, right? Now we got to correct our calendar. So, but anyway, most people are familiar with this. Next, hit it again, please. Next, please. Okay, the moon gets a little more complicated. And we've alluded to this, and probably most of you know how all of this goes. But the moon's orbit around the sun, around the Earth, takes 29.5 days. Already alluded to that, which is called a month. Or where does that come from? A month or a lunation. This diagram isn't very good because the lunar orbit is elliptical. It's not circular like this. And what you have are actions that are happening all at once. You have the Earth rotating counterclockwise every 24 hours. You have the lunar orbit going around the Earth 29.5 degrees, or 29.5 days counterclockwise as well. So it gets very complicated what is happening with the moon in terms of phases and where it's going to be. The moon's position with relative to the sun gives us the phases of the moon. And that's on this lunar cycle of 29.5 days. That's distracting. Next, please. So, just a kind of a summary here. The lunar elliptical orbit is tilted, and you saw that. Val demonstrated that pretty aptly for you with respect to the ecliptic, with respect to the path of the Earth around the sun. Next, please. And it's not really a stationary orbit because the moon precesses over a period of 18.61 years. So again, Val told you about that. So, and what the precession takes place is for or against the 23.5 degrees tilt to the Earth. Next, please. So this is a diagram. So we have C is the ecliptic, A is the axis of the Earth, and 23.5 degrees. And if we add 5 degrees to the 23.5 degrees, we have a declination of 28.5. And since the moon is going around the Earth, you're going to have extremes of that declination every 2 weeks as the moon is going around the Earth. And the extreme of this is what's called the lunar standstill. Next, please. And you see it's very simple, right, how this whole thing works out. But next, please. Next. So the result is when we observe from a stationary location, moonrise, moonset locations wander. If you try to watch the horizon point where the moon comes up and the moon sets, it's not as regular as the sun. It seems to dance all over the place. And it has to do with all these contrary motions that are taking place. But that wandering reaches a southernmost and a northernmost point every 18.61 years. Next, we call that lunar standstill. So a lot of people know about where the sun is coming up. They know about the seasons. But when you start talking about the moon, it's just a little bit different. Next, please. So we're going to talk about some archaeoastronomy now here. You've seen this picture before. This is why Chaco Canyon. Chaco is a favorite of us because a lot of work has been done in Chaco, more so than most every other place on the Colorado Plateau. Next. So that's Fajada Butte. There's something about Fajada Butte that's very, very special. And landscape seems to be very, very special. Was special back then to the Chacoan people. It is now. And contemporarily, we know that, for instance, the Navajo tribe, traditional Navajo lives between the four sacred mountains. So the mountains and the position is very, very important, and certainly was then. Chaco Canyon is special because there are 13 great houses there. And what was special about Chaco Canyon, a lot of people think Fajada Butte had a lot to do with it. Next, please. So what's there? Next, please. 13 great houses. Hit it again and again and again. One more time. So again, we're looking at a period we call the Chaco Fluorescence, 850 to 1150. Next. The largest of these is, Kim was talking about Pueblo Bonito. It's about 650 rooms. It's a huge, huge place, 37 kivas. Next. And there's some debate as to what was Chaco Canyon. What was it? Was it a distribution center? Was it a religious center? Was it a political center? We really have no good idea of what Chaco Canyon is all about with all of the study that's been done. Next, please. So, but we do know it was special because have you all been to Chaco Canyon? If you have not been to Chaco, you need to go there. It is a really special place. What has been found there are the remains of macaws, macaw feathers. Where do macaws live? Southern Mexico, Central America. So we know they were traded up. Copper bells, there's no smelting going on the Colorado Plateau. So this had to be brought up from Mexico by traders. Turquoise is very prevalent. There's more pieces of turquoise found in Chaco Canyon than anywhere else on the Colorado Plateau. It was almost like it was a turquoise factory. Shells from the Pacific, lots more than that as well. Next, please. And as Kim related to you, also cacao or chocolate was found there with the cylinder jars. Very, very special place with all of that going on. Next, please. Okay, it's not only Chaco Canyon, right in the middle of this little cluster of marks here is Chaco Canyon, where the 13 great houses are. But as you can see, those marks all across the Colorado Plateau, we have what are called Chacoan outliers. There's over 150 of these. They have the same architecture. They have what are called great kivas. They had the right ceramics. So we know that this was a system. We avoid naming exactly what it was, but there was a regional system of like structures and maybe connections to the Central Canyon. Chaco is a central place. It's very important, seemingly. Next, please. If you've heard of anything astronomical about Chaco Canyon, you've probably heard about this. And this is the sun dagger, was first noticed by Anna Sofer, who is an artist. She was documenting rock art. Happened to be on Fajada Butte documenting rock art. And this phenomenon occurred for like 15 minutes. I mean, just being at the right place at the right time is just pretty phenomenal. But what this is a photograph that's taken, Park Service photograph, of what happens. This happens to be winter solstice. On winter solstice, these 3 slabs of sandstone that are in front of the Sundagger create these shafts of light that exactly bracket this spiral. Next, please. What happens in the summer is you get one shaft of sunlight that comes right smack dab through the spiral. So this is given the name the Sundagger. And a lot of people know that it's out of limits now. You can't go there. Although one Texas fellow decided to charter a helicopter one year and land on the top of Fajada Butte, which is off limits. And he wasn't very smart because there were identification numbers on the tail of the helicopter. So, and this dude was fined like $10,000. But you go, he probably went, cool, that's the coolest thing I ever did for $10,000. But don't try it, okay? Don't try it. But it is off limits. Unfortunately, we can't go up there. However, next slide, please. There's some really interesting things about Fajada Butte that a lot of people go to Chaco don't notice, and that's this. On the west side, we have this structure, hit it again, please, which is actually a constructed ramp. There's a ramp system, and it's in 3 sections. The center section has kind of fallen away. Next, please. It is lined by these, as archaeologists will tell you, they're fire pits. So, and from the tail of that ramp starts a short segment of a road. The Chacoans built roads. They didn't have the wheel, they didn't have pack animals. Why would you need a road? And we always say that if we don't understand, archaeologists, I tease my wife about this as an archaeologist. If you don't know what it is, you say it's ceremonial, right? So it's ceremonial. There's a road section that comes off of this, lined with these fire pits, which kind of suggests some kind of ceremony. Something was going on there. Next, please. And Kim was talking about this. This is a backcountry. It's a kiva that is unexcavated. It looks like just a big dent in the ground. But the kiva, it's a huge one. It's over 60 feet across. There was something very special about this. And what was very interesting about it is its orientation with the ramps that are coming off of Fajada Butte. That happens to be Kim's theodolite sitting there. So we were doing some measurements and I was doing the photography. Next, please. He showed you a photograph similar to this. This is winter solstice sunrise from that unexcavated kiva. Is it accidental that there's a ramp? Is it accidental there's a road leading from the ramp? Is it accidental that that kiva was placed there? Probably not. Probably not. And again, we're looking at circumstantial evidence. And if this is the only thing we're seeing out there, we go, well, that's pretty cool, but is it really, really important? Next, please. Here you heard about this too. Piedra del Sol, the sun on the rock. This is the petroglyph, hopefully with the solar flares. Next, please. On the back side, oh, this is the NASA photograph, just that you've seen better ones than this. Next, please. On the back side of this rock is a spiral that is very, very well worn. And that's my camera that I was photographing from that point, looking at the horizon from the backside of Piedra del Sol. Next, please. Here's what the horizon looks like. And there is this pyramidal-shaped rock. But watch this. Hit it again.
Good Lord.
Isn't that cool?
Got to be kidding.
I don't think that's accidental. Can you do that again? Can you back up and do that again?
What day of the year is that?
Well, that is summer solstice, but it is interesting that you asked the question. It is 2 weeks before summer solstice. So, which begs the question, what are we looking at? Why would that be important from that vantage point? And I've used a term, and Kim is not sure that I'm using the right term. Call it anticipatory. Okay, if Chaco is a pilgrimage site, what are you going to do? They've built roads coming into Chaco Canyon. if you're going to have a big party, you're going to have a ceremony on solstice, you got to know solstice is coming. You got to know solstice is coming. You got to grandma and the kids. You got to get the regalia together. You got your food together. You got to start trekking out to Chaco. So we have a lot of sites like this that we call anticipatory for better lack of a better term. Next, please. Here's another one. This is one of the great houses that's a little bit farther out of the canyon. It's called Wajiji. And next, please. I put a little star on the next one. It's my viewpoint for photography. Next, please. And what we're looking at from there is the conjunction of two mesas. One's called Chaco Mesa, the other is called West Mesa. And there's a little gap in between. Here is winter solstice. Next, that's winter solstice, sunrise. Right at that end of the gap. Where do you think the sunrise is 2 weeks before solstice? It's on the other end of the gap. Yeah, wish I had a photograph of that. But the anticipatory, the sun is on the other end of that gap. Next, please. So again, was that an accidental placement of that great house? Probably not. They probably had that all scoped out. They knew that notch was going to be visible from there. This is another other great house called Quinclitzo. Quinclitzo's named Yellow House, and if you are there when the sun comes up, this whole wall is bright yellow. So it's unremarkable that they call it the Great House or the Yellow House. Next, please. Here is sunrise of winter solstice. It happens, again, the importance of landscape. There is this cliff face that ends in the floor of Chaco Canyon, and at winter solstice, where does the sun come up? Right smack in that gap. Next, please. And actually, the photograph here next, I think I put a star in the next one. The vantage point for that photograph was on this particular wall that's the closest to you. And it can be anywhere on that wall where you set up your camera and you'll get that sun coming up right at that notch. Next, please. What happens if you do anticipatory? 2 weeks before, comes up in that gap. Next, please. What that tells me is, if you look at this structure, it's not rectangular. It's not a rectangular great house. It'd be nice and easy to make a rectangular great house. This wall is slanted, this wall is slanted, and they're slanted according to the trajectory of the solstice and the anticipatory. So it's smaller at one end and larger at the other end. Yeah. So it seems like even the architecture was designed to accommodate where they would see the sun on these various periods of time. Next, please. Oh, I think I just put another one on that shows vantage points for making photographs. This is an interesting thing, and I borrowed these photographs from my friend G.B. Cornucopia, if you know him. He was one of the interpretive rangers at Chaco, recently retired. He was their resident astronomer, and there's a real loss to Chaco Canyon. But anyway, he did these photographs. Here is a window. I hate to use the term window. It's a wall opening in Chaco Canyon in Pueblo Bonito. There are 13 of these corner windows. And the archaeologists say, well, those were not originally designed in the structure, but during the Chaco fluorescence, they redesigned, they did some remodeling, and they put in these corner windows. Architecturally and structurally, it's really hard to do something like that. It compromises your structure. So why did they put these things in there? Next, please. This particular one, if you go to the room on the interior of that window, that opening, you have a very curious thing in this room. You've got this, I call it a bump out. Instead of making just a rectangular room, you have this little corner that's built out. Next, please. Well, my friend GB, what he's doing, he said, well, I want to watch what happens. This is aimed toward winter solstice. So I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen. This is October 22nd. You see a little tiny sliver of light is coming through. Next, as you go towards solstice, what happens to that? Next one. It comes around that bump. Next One. And that's solstice. You get the exact outline of the window on that back wall. Is that accidental? Hardly. Next, please. And next. So as you go after solstice, that phenomenon just creeps back out. It's only on that one day or a couple of days you get that full image of the window on that back wall. Yeah. Kind of curious, kind of interesting. Yeah. Next, please. And Dr. Melville Kim, he talked about this as well. This is a photograph from up on the cliff of Pueblo Bonito, the largest of the great houses. And this was renovated during what we call a chocolate fluorescence. Originally, and I think Kim talked about this, is the original part of this structure was over here, and what they did was reoriented by building onto it. And they swung the whole thing around. They swung the whole orientation around. Next, please. Around this. And it is a wall that goes right through the middle of this. You can see it right here. And that wall is perfectly north-south. It's within a few degrees of true north. So how did they find true north-south? Most people say, well, use the north-south, North Star. In the year 1050, the North Star was at least 4 degrees off of true north. It was not on the true north. How did they find absolute north-south? And something was very peculiar about this. It was very important because, as Kim said, they built it over kivas that were there. So they filled in the kivas, they put this north-south wall in there, swinging the whole structure around to be oriented north-south. So it appears cardinal directions were really, really important to these people as well. Next, please. So, and that's been noticed for a long time. This is a diagram from John Stein. John Stein was working back in the 1970s, 1978, and he was diagramming what was happening in Chaco Canyon. We have two of the large great houses. Here's Bonito, another one called Chetroquetl, exactly east-west of one another. And you have north-south, a great house called Zincletzen, which is way up on the cliff, and Pueblo Alto, which are exactly north-south of one another. So is this accidental? Probably not, because we see this again and again. Next, please. Here's a photograph that I did, and we have what's called Casa Rinconada, which we're going to talk about, a great kiva on this end. Here is New Alto. Casa Rinconada was built late, and the alignment wasn't right between Casa Rinconada and Pueblo Alto, so they built New Alto. So this little bump on the horizon there is another great house called New Alto. Those are exactly north-south of one another. So interesting. The diagram there is from a book. Hit it again, please. Steve Lexon. If you've heard Steve Lexon's name, he wrote a book called Chaco Meridian, and he's an archaeologist, pretty well known. And he is. We talk about him. He is Dr. Teflon, because he has the courage to throw out hypotheses that a lot of people go, no, you're crazy. And one of them is he calls it the Chaco Meridian. What he noticed is the north-south orientation of a lot of things, including a archaeological sequence of where the seat of power was. After Chaco faded, Chaco is here, it seems like the power went north to a place called Aztec ruins, and that was a large settlement for quite a long period of time. There's some great houses there. And when Aztec fell apart, we're talking about the year 1300, when everybody left the Colorado Plateau and moved on. One of his hypotheses was some of them went south, and south into what's the Chihuahuan Desert, Casa Grande's, a place called Paquime. And why he makes that analogy, Paquime is made out of adobe. It's pooled adobe, but it has Chacoan features. It's got T-shaped doorways. It's got the right pottery. It's got all kinds of things that are really similar. So again, it's just extrapolating this obsession with north-south orientation. And there's more to it than that. From Chaco Canyon, there is a road that the Chacoans built. They call the Great North Road. Goes from 30-some miles. It's north-south. So how did they do that? How do you keep a north-south orientation with no line of sight? Which is another thing that we talk about. Next, please. This is Casa Rinconada, which is a great kiva that's been excavated, and it's 64 feet across. Next, please. Its orientation is absolutely cardinal. What we're looking at in the photograph is the north end of it, looking toward the south. So there's a north doorway, north window, north and south. And if you look at the structure of where the timbers were put, they're exactly oriented north-south. It's perfectly done. The other thing that I love about the Casa Rinconada is it has niches carved into the wall along here. There's a row of these. There are 28 of those. What does that remind you of?
Oh, lunar cycle.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to, yeah, you're absolutely right. So next, please. This is sunrise, summer solstice. There is a wall opening that is pointed in the right direction, and what happens is this shaft of light comes through that wall opening. It's like at Pueblo Bonito that I was showing you. The light shaft crawls across the wall and ends up in this niche. Next slide, please. Winter solstice, the sun is in a different position, and the light comes through that south entrance, crawls across the wall, ends up in this niche. So you go, this is an astronomical observatory. Now to take this one step further, we have a archaeoastronomy friend by the name of Ron Sutcliffe. Next, please. And I borrowed this. He gave a talk. I asked his permission to use this. I did this. This is a screenshot from one of the things he did. What he did was to show diagrammically, this is the path of the light at summer solstice coming in, and it reaches a niche over here. Here's the path of the light at winter solstice comes in. What's the white streaks? Lunar standstill. Lunar standstill. Comes in the same openings, and they have created a niche in the middle here where the moonlight will concentrate. Wow. I mean, this place just makes my hair stand up. It is fabulous. It is a fabulous place. That being the whole structure being cardinal. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Next, please. So, that's Chaco Canyon. We have to move on to something else, right? And we're talking about outliers. These are structures that look like Chaco's architecture. They have all the hallmarks. They're built in the right era, all of that. The chronology is right, the ceramics are right, the exchange goods are right. So there's next please, there are over 150 of these outliers on the Colorado Plateau, and possibly 50 more. They keep finding these things out there that look distinctly Chacoan. There's an awful lot of archaeoastronomy that hasn't been done in these structures. I'll bet there's an awful lot to look at out there. Next, please. Here's one of them. This is called Yucca House. And most people haven't been to Yucca House. Yucca House National Monument is it's the right era. There's a great house, the remains of a great house in Yucca House. It is sitting at the base. This is Mesa Verde, and this is an old photograph from the late 1800s by William Henry Jackson. And what is remarkable about this is identified as a mound that used to be a great house. And when Jackson did this, there was room and wall segments that are Chacoan in nature. They're just clearly Chacoan construction. Next, please. This is what it looks like today. It's the same mound is still there. Most of the walls are gone, but knowing what it used to represent, it gives interest. And this I can blame Kim for. He said, you need to be out there at winter solstice. Again, he likes giving me these assignments when it's really cold out there. It's go out there to Yucca House. And I lived in Durango at the time, so it wasn't a big deal. But went out there. Next, please. What's remarkable about that mound is that from the top of that mound, this is Mesa Verde again in the back, from the top of the mound you can see the rock toe of what's called Sleeping Ute Mountain. Sleeping Ute Mountain is right on the Colorado-Utah border. Sleeping Ute Mountain has this one feature at the very tail, the very south end of it is this rock toe. Next please. That's what sunset at winter solstice is. Sunset is right smack on top of that toe. So you go, yeah, it's just, these things to me are way too much to be coincidental. Next, please. This one is, I should have Kim talk about this. Kim has written a book about this. This is Chimney Rock. Chimney Rock is in southern Colorado to the east of Durango. Kim's book's called The Ultimate Outlier of Chimney Rock. This is an aerial photograph. Interesting place because we have these two rock spires sticking out, and on this knife-edge ridge, we have the remains of a Chaconne great house. What a terrible place to build a great house. Yeah, it's just sheer on both sides of it. So why put a great house here? Next, please. The dendrochronology is interesting. Everybody know about dendro? This is how you date structures. You look at tree rings, send them to the University of Arizona where they have a tree ring lab. They can tell you exactly when that tree was cut. So the dates, there are many dates, but there are a bunch of them that have construction episodes 1076, 1093. What do you think's significant about those dates? They're lunar standstill dates. So this is Dr. Malville. He went, interesting. Next, please. So there are the two rock spires. It's Chimney Rock and Companion Rock. Next, please. This is Kim's photograph from 1988. It's the first one to document what happened there at lunar standstill. This is moonrise at the northern extreme. Full moon right between those spires from that great house. Next, please. So, again, another assignment. This is 2007, January. This is my photograph, the full moon right between the spires at lunar standstill. And this, I'm a little bragging here. Next, please. That was put on the cover of American Archaeology. So I was very proud of that. But it's very clear that Chimney Rock is a very special place, and it's a lunar site. That why else would you have a great house in a very inconvenient place? Next, please. Okay, leaving Chaco and Chaco outliers, this is Mesa Verde National Park. And I was fortunate. My wife was an archaeologist, so I got backcountry privileges. I could go whenever I wanted to go. So next, please. We were in there at the very end of Cliff Palace. If you've all been there, at this end it doesn't show is this feature. It's a square tower that is built as part of the structure. Next, please. Inside of it is this curious pictograph. And the pictograph has 4 vertical lines that have 18 hatch marks, 19 hatch marks, 18 hatch marks, 19 hatch marks. What does that remind you of? And there's a wall opening facing the opposite canyon. Next, please. What it's facing is this structure over here that's called Sun Temple. And you go to Mesa Verde National Park, there's a sign there that says, we don't know what the hell this thing is. People didn't live here, there's no wall openings, you can't get in it. Unfortunately, when they did the original excavation, one story is that when they did the excavation, they took away most of the stone to build the superintendent's residence. Archaeologically, that's not a good idea, right? So the idea is it looks like the interior of this thing looks like there are two round structures that were probably towers. And this is reminiscent of the two towers at Chimney Rock. So again, these are the sight lines from the square tower, looking across Canyon to Sun Temple, right between those two. And I'm going to show you winter solstice, again, the sunrise right between those two structures on the mesa top. Next, please. There's what Sun Temple looks like, and it's got this kind of funky looking tree. So if you keep your focus on that. Next, please. There is Moonset Southern Extreme Lunar Standstill. From the square tower, Cliff Palace, right over Sun Temple, exactly in the center. Next, please. Also, just to the, what direction would that be? The east, I think, of Sun Temple is this. We call them peck basins. I had a Hopi friend called them a potho. Pothos are places where you put offerings. And from that location, looking back at Sun Temple, next please, there's winter solstice. So, and these were really fun to do. The lunar standstill photographs we took was 2 a.m. My wife and I were out there all by ourselves in the dark. The law enforcement had signed off. The bat study people had signed off. We're out there just having a good time doing the photographs. This one, too, was winter solstice, and it's a gated place. It's about 6 or 8 miles out. And there was about 10 inches of snow on the ground. And we had our little Subaru, and she said, "Are you sure you want to go out there and do this?" So we did. This is the challenge for archaeoastronomers. How many sunsets have you missed because it was cloudy? How many things have you missed because there's too much snow on the ground? So it's just very fortunate when you can put it all together and make it work. Next, please. This is one more, give you one more outlier. This is a place called Yellow Jacket Pueblo, which is a huge, huge place. Next, please. It's outside Cortez, Colorado. It has the remains of a great house and a great kiva at one end of it. And unfortunately, the great house is on private land, so it's never really been excavated. But what got interest of archaeoastronomers is at this end was a line of standing stones or monoliths. They were all in a line, kind of pointing in a direction. Next, please. Here's one of them. I think it's about the only one standing. I was just reading somewhere that somebody has now noticed that it's leaning, so it won't be there very long. But there were at least 3 of them that made a line to the horizon, and the horizon was pointed toward summer solstice. So it's on this diagram. Next, please. One more time. I got a space in there. This is what summer solstice looks like. And you go, well, that's cool, but it's not very remarkable. Next, please. Here's anticipatory. That's a place called Lizard Head Peak. And Lizard Head Peak is framed by this. I took it one year. There was a lot of fires, so the sky has this red color. But sunset is right over Lizard Head Peak, if you follow the line from those standing stones. Next, please. So, I'd keep you here the rest of the day, which you don't want to. But the big question is, how many more of these are out there? There's got to be tons of them that haven't been noticed. But I can't resist, I got to show you one more that just blew me away. Next slide, please. This is a petroglyph somebody told me about. And this is up way north. It's way north of the region. It's up by Moab, this place called Back of the Rocks. And it's a very terrible place to get to. This is summer solstice. We had to go out there. It was 103 degrees. So, and it's 6 miles out. So it was not pleasant to go to. But this is a petroglyph of a rattlesnake. It's 16 feet long. It is just exquisite. But if you're there at about 11 o'clock in the morning, next, look what the sun does. Isn't that fabulous? It forms this arrowhead right at the head of the snake. Yeah, So I think that's cool. I don't know what it means, but I thought it was just pretty neat thing. That was our reward for making that hike out there, because it was fabulous. Yeah. Next, please. So I just want to leave you with this. We don't like mysteries. We like absolutes, right? What we want to do is assemble evidence, and we can define it. So we can say, this is exactly how it is. And here's an example. I think this is in Georgia or something. So we're not satisfied. And that's a bottomless pit. No, it's 65 feet deep. So yeah, we need evidence. We need evidence, and we're more satisfied when we have really definitive answers about most things. So sometimes we don't have them. We have circumstantial evidence. To me, it's pretty commanding. I think these people were very, very sophisticated astronomically, and all the evidence is pointing in that direction. Next, please. So that's all I got for you. All right, wow. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so are you guys having a good time? Yeah. So we got just a few more minutes. We have one more presentation. It's Dr. Ken Minschwater. He's going to show us a weather balloon launch and talk a little bit about the project that they're working on campus. He's going to start right at 11:59, he said. They're already kind of showing us what they're doing, so you can see all of that as right now. Just a little housekeeping stuff. The bus was going to pick us up back at gate 20 where they dropped us off. So if we're all here and I can account for all of us, we'll leave as soon as this is over. Otherwise, we'll stick to the 1 o'clock. But if you need to go to the bus when this is over, you're welcome to go ahead and go out there. I'll make sure that the bus drivers are out there and have it open by 12:30. Okay, so that talk will be really quick. Get out to the bus if you want, hang out if you want, and we'll try to get out of here early if we can.
Well, we're here from campus of New Mexico Tech in Socorro. For those of you that don't know where Socorro is, we're about 75 miles south of Balloon Fiesta Park. We have students that are preparing to launch a weather balloon. They've been launching balloons every hour on the hour, starting at 10 a.m. yesterday and extending through the eclipse. And now they're putting the final touches on, securing the balloon. On the end of the balloon is an instrument that's being used to measure temperature, pressure, and relative humidity. So I'm going to just be quiet and we'll take a look, see. At noon, they'll be launching. Oh, we still have some time. Okay, well, these things take time to prepare. So we have a little bit of a breeze too, and that can cause some difficulties. Okay. So, but let me first. We should describe kind of the process and who's here. So at New Mexico Tech, the physics department is primarily astrophysics and atmospheric physics, and you might think that there's not a lot in common. However, there's a lot of overlap, and this eclipse is a great example. For example, to see the eclipse, we have to look through the atmosphere. And this morning we had some high clouds here in Socorro. I don't know what it was like in Albuquerque. Hopefully it was a little bit clearer than it was here. But we still had a good view. So the atmosphere can affect what we're studying for stars and the sun. But on the other hand, the sun has a big effect on the atmosphere. And that's what we're trying to study here, is the effect of the eclipse. We're posing. So we have teams from 3 different universities in Minnesota. And I know I have to make sure I get this correct. We have faculty advisors, Rachel Humphrey from St. Cloud State University, Steve Highland from Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, and Eric Agrimson from St. Catherine University, along with about a dozen students. And we're going to talk with some of the students shortly, but we don't want to distract them from the business at hand, which is launching this balloon. Which 5 minutes. Okay, so we still have 5 minutes. Let's see. Well, let's bring Steve over here. Well, I have a couple questions for you. First of all, why 30 balloons?
Well, we wanted to bracket the time before and after the eclipse, to get a feel for the weather before the eclipse happens, for 24 hours, and then afterwards to see what effect the eclipse, if you can see the effect of the eclipse in the middle.
Okay. How long do the balloons stay in the air? And how high do they go? How far do they go? And what happens when the balloon pops?
Well, our flights have been lasting a couple hours, I would think. They vary a bit, but they go up about 30 kilometers or so. One of them got up to 35.3 kilometers, really way up there. Wow. Which is, of course, way more than 20 miles.
Now, for those of us that are familiar with aviation, we think in terms of feet. So 30 kilometers would be over 100,000 feet?
100,000 feet. It's way up there. It's great.
Okay. And so what happens then when the balloon bursts, and where do they come down?
Well, they'll come down wherever they come down. But our first one, you told me that it landed somewhere in the Manzano Mountains. Have I got that right? Yeah. So when we looked at the map, the balloon ended up, it took about an hour, and it ended up over mountain air, and probably descended somewhere in the Manzano Mountains. Now, there's a little parachute attached to that so that it doesn't come down too fast.
Too fast. Now, do you go out and try to collect them after they're launched?
Oh, no, this is meant to be a discarded object. But, occasionally some come back that somebody finds out in the middle of nowhere and wonders what it is. Oh, I'd like to keep it for a trophy if that happens. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But they must not be very easy to find.
Oh, it's so tiny. It only weighs 100 grams. It's styrofoam. In the old days, I used to fly these things from the 60s. Those were bigger, and deer hunters would bring them back to us, all covered with moss and growth, years of sitting around. But of course, it's not worth anything other than just to have fun with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds good. Is there any other information about the balloon launches that you'd like to share with us?
Other than the fact that we found out how cold it gets here in the middle of the night. Whoa.
So the desert evenings can be cold. And I think the people at the Balloon Fiesta Park can also attest to how cold it gets at 5 a.m. in the morning, waiting for the balloons to go up. And now, so these aren't like the hot air balloons. And so what is making these balloons buoyant?
This is helium. And helium's hard to get. So the people organizing this big project worked very, very hard to organize the helium for this many balloons all over the place.
Okay, and then one of the reasons that they're launching from here is because they were able to ship the helium to New Mexico Tech, and we also have some expertise in ballooning here at New Mexico Tech, and so it was a really great collaboration. We've really enjoyed having you guys come visit.
I had a great time. Yeah. I wish I had time to stick around longer.
Good. Well, hopefully you get a green chili cheeseburger.
Oh, is that the thing they get?
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's right. Now we're getting close to time to launch. How much time do we have, Eric?
We have minus a minute and 15 seconds.
Okay, so that may be enough time to just show the folks what the instrument looks like that we have. Okay, so
this is what the instrument looks like. So
first we should introduce, this is Eric Agramson, and you're at St. Catherine's College?
I am at, it's now St. Catherine University, but yep, in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we are the second largest all women's institution in the entire nation. So, our entire team is made up of women, and we are the only team in the United States that's made up of entirely all women undergrads. And the next closest team, I think, is only 35%. So we are exceptional.
Yeah, I would say that's excellent. That is great. You guys are doing terrific work. So can we zoom in on this? Maybe what I can do is I will hold this and I'll hit, or do we have to launch here pretty soon?
We're getting close here. So
okay.
90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay. Right, yeah. So we should probably hold off on the description of this thing.
We'll do the description on this for a hot second, but
okay. Well, I'll let you hold that and you can point out things that
sure. So, and Steve, keep sidetrack for me. So this is the radio sun. So as Steve's already talked about, these are, there's not much weight associated with them. Right. And so I don't know if you can even focus in on the tip here where my finger is. That's actually the temperature probe up there. So that's measuring your temperature. And then you've also got relative humidity, pressure that can be recorded here, and then we can also get GPS, so we can get latitude, longitude, so we know exactly where we're collecting the data from, relative humidity, and so all that's relayed down via the antenna. Yep. So
Here's the antenna.
Ken's got the antenna right there, and so that's relayed down to our antenna on the ground here, and that lets us know sort of what's going on. And so this is 30 seconds. So we'll do a countdown here.
Okay, yeah, we should step out of the way.
All right, and I'll give you back the microphone, and I'll do the countdown here.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Eric.
20, 15, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Release. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I should say I had to prompt the students to give out a few woohoos. They did them earlier in the project yesterday, but they're tired. They were out here all night. Yeah. So and so now may be a good time to perhaps interview some of the students. Are we okay with this range here, or would you like us to come closer? No? Okay. So if you could tell us, give us your name, what school you're going to, and how long have you been ballooning, and what you found interesting about working on this project.
My name is Aurora. I am a student at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College up in Cloquet, Minnesota. I am actually a nursing major and health science major. I've been ballooning now for a little over a year and a half, and I was able to take a course through Fond du Lac, which was really nice. I have always been astounded by astronomy and everything with it, so to see it is just beautiful, and to see all the amount of different changes as we send up these balloons.
Terrific. Well, thanks a lot, and first time to New Mexico?
Oh yeah.
Well, I hope you come back.
Yeah, me too. It's been really nice.
Thank you. Okay, and who we?
I'm Amanda. I am from St. Cloud State University in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I am a meteorology major. What else?
Okay. Well, how long have you been ballooning, Amanda?
I have been ballooning for just over a year, but today and yesterday was the first time I actually got to launch balloons.
What do you think? Do you like doing it? You're going to do more of this?
I absolutely am going to do more of this if I get the chance. I'm really excited for the trip that we're going to be going on in April for the total solar eclipse.
Great. Well, thank you, Amanda. And now, who do we have?
Hi, my name is Susan. I am a student from St. Catherine, Minnesota, and St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm at St. Catherine University in St. Paul, Minnesota.
And what is your major?
I am a third-year student studying biochemistry and minoring in economics.
How did you get involved with ballooning?
I got involved with ballooning through one of my good friends, Khadija, and she introduced me to the team and what the team was about. She was like, "You have to get into it." So I did. I got into it and I really enjoyed it, doing it. So and over the summer we worked on a couple of projects related to ballooning, and it was really nice getting like a good introduction to ballooning and air science in general.
Terrific. Well, welcome to New Mexico. Hope you come back.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, some of the other activities that I wanted to point out that have been going on here at Tech have been taking place at the athletic field. We had about 500 people out there. We had solar telescopes. We made s'mores in solar ovens, although they was not too effective during the eclipse. We have temperature sensors that we were using to measure the air temperature. We measured about a 4 or 5 degree Fahrenheit drop in temperature during the maximum part of the eclipse, which is not unexpected. But what in particular for the balloons, what we're interested in is how the upper part of the atmosphere responds to eclipses. And to give you an example of some of the data that is coming in from these instruments, we're going to share a screen here in a minute, and you'll see, hopefully, there we go. Okay, so what we're looking at is a plot in the vertical axis is the altitude, And the balloons typically will get up to 30 kilometers. This one only goes up to 12. But you can see the left-hand plot in the green is pressure. And the pressure decreases fairly uniformly as you go up in altitude. On the other hand, on the other plot, which is the red, let's focus on the red plot, that is temperature. And temperature decreases rather uniformly as you go up in altitude. But at the very top part, you can see wiggles in the temperature. It's not linear and it's not even very smooth. It's those jagged features that we're interested in, and they're called gravity waves or buoyancy waves. And we see them in the atmosphere if wind blows over a mountain, or if there's a big storm, it can generate these waves. But eclipses can generate those waves too. So one of the objectives of this project is to try to determine how these waves are generated, how large they are, how long they persist. And yeah, I think that's great. We can stop the share. So I think that's pretty much it. Once the balloons go up, we sit around, we watch the data, we make sure we have good connections. You can probably see off in the distance there. I don't know if you want to zoom in over there. We have a couple of ground stations with antenna on top that are receiving the data from the radiosondes in real time. And of course, once all these, there's going to be 30 launches. They're going to suspend operations at about 4 p.m. today after the eclipse. But with 30 launches, there's a lot of data. And the other thing that I should point out about this project, it's on my hat. It's the Nationwide Eclipse Ballooning Project. It's run out of Montana State University, and they have at least 50 universities. If you go online, you'll see a lot of partners, and not only balloons like this that are being launched to measure the response of the atmosphere, but they had some other teams, engineering teams, that had much larger balloons that had video cameras on them to image the eclipse from very high altitudes. In fact, we assisted a couple of those teams with logistics here, but they're out in the field because it's much more important for those teams to fly through the annular part of the eclipse, whereas here in Socorro, we didn't get a perfect annular eclipse, but it was close enough, we think, to generate these gravity waves that perhaps can be seen from the data. Now, did you have something, Eric?
I just wanted to say thanks for hosting us, and it has been a real pleasure, with all our flights. So just thank you, Ken, for
It's our pleasure.
yeah, no, thanks for having us. So it's just it's been a wonderful. New Mexico has been just wonderful to us, and so I just wanted to thank you all for watching here too, and I just appreciate all the support, and it's just been fantastic. It's just lots of really cool data coming in, and it's we got more work to do yet. And as you were mentioning, so our cohorts at the engineering side have lots of interesting recoveries to do yet. So whereas ours, we just have a sticker that if you find our stuff, please return it to us. So that would be great.
They have to actually go out and track those video cameras because they probably don't get sent back to them.
They will, yes, they will need to do that. So and then we're going to ramp up in the spring. We're going to do some work with some relativistic measurements. So we're doing some work with muons and also neutrals. So we're going to do some personal neutron dosimeters that we're going to fly in the spring in addition to what we're doing here. So I don't think we shared that. So so we're going to send up some P&Ds in the spring with our team anyway from St. Kate's and look at sort of charged and uncharged particles. We've got a Geiger-Muller tube we're going to also fly. So we're going to correlate those. That's one of the work that we're going to do. So
that sounds great. Yeah. Hopefully we can help you out with that.
We will.
Anytime in the future, let us know.
Yeah, we will. So thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Okay. I think that's it for now. We'll sign off, and happy ballooning, everyone.